vehicles. So if you don't find alternative ways to make money other than fossil fuel, which of course has to be creativity, creativity in the sciences, well, it's not going to be looking good in the next 20 years when the population goes to 350. Okay, how does Taiwan make money? Taiwan does not have oil. They sell over 500 billion annually, more than that. Of what? Chips, CDs.
Yep. Hi, my name is Joanne Wilson. I would like to welcome you to TTT once again. Today we will continue the conversation on the Nigerian foreign exchange crisis. We will first examine the role of the Nigerian population on the situation. We will try to understand the problem further and examine approaches to tackling it. This is an issue with huge consequences. Please welcome with me in the studio my guest, Femi James. Welcome, Femi.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. He speaks on business, economics, philosophy, and religion. I have personally enjoyed insightful discussions with him, and I hope you will as well. My first question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think the Nigerian population has really affected the exchange rate?
Oh, well, generally when you speak to matters of economics in Africa generally, and there's always the blanket approach to always blaming on poor planning and all of that. But amidst all of this comes the fact that there are very serious issues that one has to take apart, and you're able to say this exactly is the problem. So one of them is the population thing. And before you really understand it, you will have to try to wrap it around the understanding of root causes, symptoms, effects, and outcomes of problems. So sometimes when people who have the authority to solve these problems, when they approach it, most times working on the symptoms. Sometimes they are working on the effects, and sometimes they are taking the outcomes head on. However, the real root causes, most times they are ignored. So when you look at the population, I mean, it's just a very simple scenario. It's not something so tough to understand. Like we're sitting here right now, and you have 2 slices of bread. You take one, I take one. It becomes that easy. But if a third person comes, then we have to drill that down, and that gets a little smaller. And when you now invite 200 people, then it becomes a little here and there, and nobody gets anything. At the end of the day, we all stay hungry. So this is exactly what's happening with population in Africa. In 1960, the UK was 52 million. We were just 45 million. So that tells you that as at that time, you have the UK and us, we just don't have the numbers as they do have. And today we have about 230 million as estimated. And the UK has about 67. So you can see this much of a gap in the life
reversed.
of a young. Exactly. So you will see that over time, one country has grown by 15 million, another country has grown by close to 180 million or 185 million. So you will see that the country has grown so tremendously. However, this does not alone explain everything. So how has the population affected this? We have to now go back to what happened after the Second World War, or maybe during the Second World War, when the US dollar became the world reserve currency. So what does this mean? It simply tells you as a country, you have to have a lot of US dollars to stay alive. That's the meaning. So it is not about what you do locally. It is about how much of USD you're able to get into your coffers as a country that determines how far you can go externally. So in a situation where you don't make much of the USD, it just tells that as long as you have to import items, you have to put pressure on the available amount that you have. It's as simple as that. So what has happened in the story of Nigeria? The country has not actually produced more than 2 million barrels of oil. Oil represents the main export proceed for the country. And when you have about just 2 million barrels, since the country has been 45 million, now till 230 million, the highest the country ever pumped out was even far back about 40 years ago when they did about 2 million barrels. Right now, we'll be doing lower. So the whole of the population is now trying to make imports possible with just this little amount of USD coming in.
So, Matt, I have a question just for some clarification.
Okay.
So in this case, what you're saying is that the output of oil has pretty much stayed the same, but the demands have gotten larger and we have a larger population. So the amount of oil that is being manufactured and sold is not enough to sustain the population that's there.
Yes. The amount of oil that's been pumped out, I mean, it's not enough to, because the country relies heavily on petroleum resources. And when you rely heavily on petroleum up to the tune of 90%, that's where the problem is. That's where exactly the problem. So you have this reliance on one item that forms 9 out of 10 of every USD that you get, and you're not producing so much of it. And you're just having people, and this is where it gets so disturbing, because a lot of importation has to be done to meet local consumption, because there are not industries that are too competitive, and that's, we'll get into that discussion much later on. But to just stay in the frame of the question, so when you keep having so much numbers and you don't have, you're not making so much money to sustain the economy, then you're going to be putting pressure on everything. So let's visualize on the streets. You have a child being born last year. This year, she's going to be 1, or he's going to be 1. And you want to have a celebration to mark the 1 year birthday. And what you're having is you have to put wig, you have to buy balloons and everything. And all this comes from China. So even the 1-year-old child is putting pressure on the current, on the hard-earned USD that the country has, and you're not able to keep up with everybody making demands indirectly or directly. So this is the problem. So let me just take it a little further so that we try to understand this situation. Go to a country like Saudi Arabia, the same thing is happening. 36 million. And this country is able to pump as much as 10.5 million barrels into the international market. So they make a lot of money from that, and they're able to do a lot externally, and that's why you have a lot of their money going into football, going into bonds, because they have it. And no matter what pressure you put, it's not going to have so much effect on bringing down the value of the currency. They're able to use what they have to defend the local currencies. The 4 reals gives you 1 USD, and they are able to defend this exchange for a very long time. Kuwait, it's about, it's been almost like that since 1960, and it's about 3.25 USD exchanging for 1 Kuwaiti dinar. So, and they're able to defend it because they have enough of it to defend it. But if you don't have enough of it, you will have to devalue your local currency, and this is what eventually will happen. But I have a follow-up up to that. We have to take apart the inefficiencies that we know in the system. We have to take apart the competitiveness that we know in the system. But the mere fact that you are not making so much money, you don't have to carry this every baggage of requests, every baggage of demand. So I just want to barrel down as much as possible on this population thing, because I believe that you have to be aware that the numbers has not been helping. And it looks like in the next 20 years, 25 years, it looks like Nigeria might be moving from 230 to about 350 million. And this is a big problem. It's a big problem because the country is growing with about, at the rate of about 2.5% per annum. And when you grow at 2.5% per annum, you're likely to add another 120 million to the population in the next 20 years.
So then my curiosity would be, what is causing this population growth? Normally it would be that there's a lot of prosperity, and as a result, people feel comfortable, and then you're growing a family. But if you're having a country that has economic issues, why is the population growing at the speed that it is, or at the pace that it is?
Yes. First, people have to be aware. They have to understand how their population affect their country. That's the number one thing. And Nigerians are the ones managing Nigeria. So if you don't know how it works while you're in your bedroom or then when you become a leader, you might not be able to make any change. So people have to be aware that this is a problem. So when they know that it's a problem, then they can make conscious effort when they become members of the government to have the right policy to bring it into check.
And do you have any suggestions that would be what would be policies that could bring these things into check?
Okay, first, which is the most important, is you have to raise. You can tell people don't reproduce. I mean, you won't naturally want to do that because that will play on some other zones, other sides. There would be other philosophical, religion, and all of that. So, but the point is, if you simply raise the level of child care, then people will understand that the government is serious. So then you will have to think, I don't need to have a child that I cannot take care of. For example, if you say that all children less than 18 cannot work as a domestic servant anywhere, and you enforce that, for example, so those thinking that they can have children and send them everywhere to go make money for them, I mean, they already understand that, no, it's a no-go area. If you say that kids that are less than 18 must actually not be seen trying to sell something on the road or try, I mean, those things will pass a message. You have to just raise the level of childcare and you can do it in so many ways. So these are just, and this can be managed at the level of the local government, who are the closest to the people, where you can have officers who will check on children, check on families, and you say, for example, you don't want anybody who has a family of more than 2 or 3 to stay in a one-room apartment, for example. So you can have somebody from the local government check on this, and by the time you start to sanction people, you find people for not doing what, the message will go around.
But I understand, but if they recognize that there are now costs that must be aware, they must be aware of in terms of raising a child or starting a family, that there might not necessarily be any incentives for having more children, and that's the basic thing. The way the structure is now is that they can still find ways to be able to use their children as part of their own personal income because of the law. So you could still have a child, but your child could be working at 16, and that can be adding to the family situation. But if it's understood that a minor can't work, then they become an expense. And then if you're starting off a family, you're going to be thinking, oh, if childcare costs this, and my child has to be in school until they're 18, and they're unable to work, or they can only work in a limited fashion, we then have to be aware of how we're going to grow our family, or what means we have in order to start a family, and how that's going to affect our standard of living. And you're saying that is one of the ways that Nigeria can then sort of recover in terms of their population growth, because there's a thoughtfulness that's involved in the cost of living that way.
Exactly. So when you raise the expectations, then you have raised the standard, and it becomes a little more expensive to raise children, and then you are going to be able to plan. So when you have a few people taking good decisions in the country, it's not, you're not going to have the effect. There are a lot of people that are trying to cut their coat according to their size, and they're actually doing the proper things, but they're in the minority. So when it becomes what the majority does, then
the standard.
It becomes the standard. So you have to just make sure that you raise childcare expectations. You make sure that because there are cultural acceptance. There is the cultural acceptance of large families, and when you work on that, then one way or the other, you are able to tell everybody that I'm sorry, I'm not saying you should not have a family, but a child that is a Nigerian has to be treated to this level of quality, and when it becomes tough for you, then you have to cut down to the right number.
Okay.
That's on that. And another thing also is to speak to the culture, which I think we will talk about much later. And I just feel when we speak to the culture that tries to not care about the number of children, and just probably you do not seem to bother, and you just see that, okay, I can just have any number of children that I want. And no, you can't have any number of children that you want.
And so you're saying that traditional norms might come into play.
Exactly. So there has to be something to speak to the cultural acceptance. And when that gets foothold, then plus what the government is doing, then it can be able to curtail the number. But now we have this number, 230 million right now. So what do we do? So do we just say that we're too many, we export a lot out? No. The point is, can we work with this population? The answer is yes. But right now, we can't do much with our population if the factors of production is not right. That's for them to become productive. That's number one. And part of that is the electricity problem. You can't really move forward without having 24/7 electricity, because that's the only way people can get productive and at least have products or services that will be competitive with the ones that they are asking for outside the country.
So then what would be some of the concerns or the warnings if nothing is done? If Nigeria continues on the pace that it is and doesn't take these concerns seriously, what are the potential pitfalls for Nigeria in the future?
Okay, straight to the point on that. From 220 million, you want to go to 350 million in 20 years, 2045. Well, you will be probably the third or fourth most populous country, and you have to ask yourself, do I have the USD that I will draw from from businesses abroad, that's called exports? Will I have the USD to sustain my economy? Because if you don't have the USD, no matter what you do back home, your currency will continue to lose value. Now, 220 to 350 million in 20 years, well, I'm afraid it might not be a good story. Because it's not too easy because of two situations. First, it's not too easy to get more oil allocations or more oil quotas because nobody is willing to give these up. But let's say sometimes we have some cutting down, but they're not going to cut down so much for you to move from 2 million barrels to like 10 million barrels. So you need far more than that. That's number one.
So when you say allocations, you mean other countries that are oil-bearing countries might not necessarily reduce their output to allow Nigeria to move forward. So they're still going to say, we like how we're selling our things and how much we make, and why should we give you the opportunity to sort of grow?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two is you can look at the effect of climate change. Everything is changing. So when you have a situation where a lot of countries are trying to move towards electric vehicles. So if you don't find alternative ways to make money other than fossil fuel, which of course has to be creativity, creativity in the sciences, well, it's not going to be looking good in the next 20 years when the population goes to 350. Okay, how does Taiwan make money? Taiwan does not have oil. They sell over 500 billion annually, more than that. Of what? Chips, CDs.
Pretty much everything. It's sort of understood that Taiwan is one of those countries that if you want it, there's always a way that you could probably get it, or they'll manufacture it for you.
Exactly. So just 22 million people. So they have a lot that comes to them from creativity. You don't have to put everything down on the oil. And there's no way you can get to creativity without fixing education, because your education the education system has to be competitive with what you have with the rest of the world for you to be able to create something that the rest of the world will want from you. So coming to that, if you don't be on that line, especially in the sciences, and you begin to reduce what you have on the side of crude oil, and you can maintain what you have, but it's not really going to get you anywhere. So then that's another warning. That's what you have to look at and say, well, we don't have a good signal on the wall. Then if you don't curtail your current population, there is not any way you can manage any further development, because right now it's already choking.
Yes.
You don't want to wait till it chokes even further. Then another warning also is what I call continuous implosion due to devaluation. And I can give you an example. So if you devalue your currency, then you begin to get less of what you get. For example, the MRI machine in the hospital, you probably want to buy one for $1 million. How do you buy one for $1 million when 1 million that was probably 1.5 billion suddenly moves to 2.5 billion because you've devalued? So if the hospitals that belong to the government bring these bills, you can't even pay because you continue to lose the value of your currency, that what you're planning for, probably instead of 4, you have to now buy 2. When you buy instead of 2, you have to now buy 1. So it gets to a point you can't even buy anything.
Yes.
You understand? So when it gets to the next 20 years, that's like to 2050, it will be too late to reverse.
Okay, so you're saying
exactly
it has to be now.
So
they have to just decide that it might be a period of austerity. There might be many laws that come into play, but in order for them to survive and to be able to move forward, it has to be now, and it has to be in most likely strident.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then another thing again is when they're looking, like we said, focus on creativity. The 3 things that they look at right now is oil, foreign direct investment, diaspora remittances. For me, the only thing you should look at is the foreign direct investment. Oil, yes, continue. Reason why I said so is foreign direct investment can change everything. If you have the right brand. You can have money pouring from Saudi, from everywhere, pouring into the country. That's fine. You have to just work to make your brand so good so that it can come. That's number 1. Number 2 is the oil. We just talked about it now, which for me is not actually bringing so much. It brought less than 50 billion the year before.
There's only so much oil can do.
There's not so much they can do actually. So the third one is the foreign direct, foreign diaspora remittances. And I just
could you define that?
People like me or maybe some other people who want to send money home and all of that.
Got it. Yes.
And if you say you want to be counting on that, well, you just have to reference yourself to what's happening. Even in Canada, there was Take Canada Back or something protest some days ago, and there was some deportations from Turkey. The right wing in France is saying, I'm going to deport immigrants. I'm not talking about Nigerians though. I'm just talking all over the world.
Yes.
So for any country that is dependent on diaspora remittances, maybe they're not listening to
there's only so much of the diaspora, because they're spread out, can actually provide. It's not as if the diaspora are many different types of businesses or corporations.
Absolutely.
They are individuals who are sending whatever money that they've earned in whatever circumstances that they have wherever they are back home. And that might help a family, or it might help family members, but it's not necessarily going to be able to help the country survive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you have to just know that this is not okay. It is not what you have to depend on. Go back to the sciences, and you cannot get back to the sciences without fixing the education system, and you cannot fix the education system if you don't fund it, and you cannot fund the education system if you don't provide the right tools, which some of them will have to be provided from abroad first.
Yes, which is what some universities are doing.
Exactly.
There are many universities worldwide that have decided that Nigeria is a brain bank. And they are willing to then create different types of programming where they can have Nigerian students come over, but at the same time, for a place like for a university, that means research money. So the universities know how to be able to then benefit from the Nigerian student, but the Nigerian government then would have to say, how do we benefit from the Nigerian student and their education? And how do we make sure that there's incentives for them to come back so that they're helping us to be able to build the industry that we require so that we can then be able to create an income for ourselves and then improve the standard of living and then sort of be viable on the world stage in terms of economy.
Okay, so what you just said now wraps up everything. And if I may just make this a parting shot, you just have to understand that today's world thrives on creativity. You have to know it thrives on creativity. At least we can all see the artistic creativity of those who sing, for example, from Nigeria. Some of them are renowned all over the world. But we know artistic creativity doesn't bring that much like scientific creativity. And if you don't get into that frame on time, at least just cater for yourself. Just copy with pride. Cater for yourself first. Then you can get to the next stage, which is to compete.
Yes.
And when you get to the next stage, you can compete. Then you can get to the third stage when you can compete with the rest of the world. You get to this third stage, which I will call innovate something, so that they say, oh, it came from Africa. Well, would you say they have the ability? They don't have the ability? Well, that's another discussion. I mean, when you start...
But if they've been investing in themselves, you'll still be able to say, well, is it not? But you'll at least be able to see the track record of investment within themselves to be able to say, well, you know what? Maybe they're not there yet, but we can see that they've been trying and we can see the potential.
Yeah, you can't play good football on the rocky terrain. So you have to be on the green field and everything is looking good.
So you have to play at the green
but
field.
You're not there yet. You've not even put yourself on the green pitch. So how do we know how you play?
Yes.
So I mean, this is just the way I would like to see it. And also, you have to look at countries like Taiwan, 542 billion in 2022, just from chips, electronics, small things, and they supply the rest of the world. And they only imported about 412. That tells you they have about 130 billion somewhere that they can use for local things, and 22 million population. So those are the kind of countries that we have to try to see what they're doing, and we copy with pride.
Yes, and so we look at a model of emulation to be able to educate, and then once we're able to then determine how we're going to educate yourself, you think be able to create the structure in which is required to then be able to be able to move forward and then create a better economy.
Exactly.
Okay, that was very insightful. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.